बिल्कुल टूट गए। समझ नहीं पा रही थी कि वो सही है या गलत। आखिर उन्होंने फैसला किया कि वो अपने दोस्त को
大山意识到玛丽嘴里的丈夫便是自己的好兄弟大海，也明白了大海所肩负的使命是何其伟大。而这一次英国士兵过来，是通知玛丽这个家属去收尸的，因为还有2天，大海就被送上绞刑台。而此时的大山悔恨不已。随后，他向玛丽承诺，就算舍弃他这条命，也要把大海救回来。夜里，大山孤身一人潜入总督府，里面的监狱有诸多牢房，而且戒备很森严。但大山想到一个绝妙的办法，用他们熟悉的某种动作敲击地面。果不其然，大海瞬间惊醒，这个声音他太熟悉不过了。接着立即敲击墙壁回应。此刻大山也很激动，在确认大海的位置后，他匍匐前进，来到大海的正上方。随后，大山使出吃奶的力气，徒手将铁门掀了开，但很快吸引了英国士兵的注意。大山一把将大海拽出，背在身上，一场合二为一的大战马上打响。这2个男人合二为一，他们要冲出这座森严戒备的监狱。周围的卡拉米一起有了上来，但2人丝毫不惧。有了大山这个人形坐骑，大海的战力值达到前所未有的高度。光是这个动作，就不是一般演员能拍出来的。
浪漫海岛之港中生蛋糕，我最简真的港中生蛋糕，好吃不上瘾。
有醋意，更有爱意。
吃好醋，享红顺。恭喜男女嘉宾获得友好。
You kill the people. When you think about colonization, it is the strangest thing you can think about. Because conquering is one thing. You go to another country, you take what's theirs. You want more. You take the land, you take the resources, you kill the people. That I understand. But colonization, I don't condone. I understand. But colonization is strange because you go there and you don't just take over. You then force the people to become you. That is such a strange concept. When you think about where the British did it, I mean, they did it in Africa. They did it in Asia. And think about in India. Those cultures could not be more diametrically opposed. And out of nowhere, the British just decided to roll up. Imagine what the Indians must have felt like on that day. Minding your own business, walking through a field. Next thing you know, the British showed up on horseback. Hear ye, hear ye. By order of Her Majesty the Queen, we have arrived. You over there, what is the name of this land? This land over here? This is called India. Well, my good man, I am here to tell you that India is now under the British Empire. And I'm glad that I can tell you that India is exactly where it was yesterday. No, I feel you're not understanding what I'm saying. I'm letting you know that we're here to colonize you by order of the Queen. Who is the Queen?
Where's the Queen?
The Queen. The Queen of England, the ruler of Great Britain. She who was ordained by God. Which God? God. The one true God. There are many gods, my friend. What is the name of your God? There is only one God, and his name is God, and you too shall worship him. You want me to worship a God, but you don't want to tell me his name? What are you talking about? There are many gods, okay? There is Shiva, there is Lakshmi, there is Hare Krishna, there are many gods. What is the name of your God? His name is God. You don't know the name of your God? It's just God. Is it like mommy or daddy? You want me to worship your God, but you don't want me to tell me his name, huh? How am I going to pray to him? What do I do? Every morning I go to wake up and I pray like, oh, dear God, I was hoping that maybe God, you could help me. No, sorry, not you, other God. No, other God. No, not the wrong God. No, God, I was trying to talk to other. No, you're right. I should have asked for her first name. No, God. No, other God, please. No, God behind that God. No, not you today, God. Other God. You're right. He told me he would know I was talking to, and I don't. No, other God, please. That God. No, that God. You. Then I wonder why my friends are not getting answered, huh? How dare you speak to me like that? Do you know who I am? No, because you never introduced yourself. I have come here representing Great Britain. And I have never heard of Great Britain. Who gave you that name?
Yoga.
Well, we did. You called yourselves great? Isn't that a little presumptuous? Shouldn't you wait for other people to tell you how great you are? Huh? Shouldn't you just go around the world and just do good things? Then people go, oh my God, Britain, look how great you are. I beg to differ. I believe we could do it because we knew instinctively we are Great Britain. Well, in that case, welcome to Great India. No, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. How dare you speak to me like this? Look, you're the one who dares to speak to me, okay? I was here minding my own business in my land. You came over here riding on your skinny cow telling me that things are going to change. I don't know who you are. All I know is you're really crazy. Okay, you're not feeling too right. And I didn't want to say anything, but you look like you're going to faint. In fact, it looks like you have died last week, okay? Something is very wrong with your skin. You're not looking good, my friend. Maybe you should come down. We have a curry. We talk about this. What are you talking about? I look quite normal. You do not look normal, my friend. I've never seen anybody with that complexion in my life, okay? You look like you're playing hide and seek with the sun your entire life. I don't know what is happening, but that is not how a person should look, huh? I can see your veins pumping through your skin right now. You know how creepy that is? Pumping, 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 pumping. If I was your doctor, I don't need X-ray machine. I just go, what is problem? It is your kidney. How do I know? Because you're translucent. That is how I know. Damn you, we are going to run this country whether you like it or not. We are not going to do anything you tell us. You're a madman. We are going to take it. You're not taking. We're going to... She's all yours. Take.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so you can win cool prizes. And by prizes, I mean surprise. There's no prizes. It's a free YouTube video, you greedy. Just click the video, man. Why you want free things on free things?
Hello everyone. Hello, good evening. Well, we're here for a very special night with Guardian Live. I'm Matt Ford, and tonight I'm interviewing one of the biggest names in global comedy and one of the most recognisable satirists on the planet. His new book, Born a Crime, which I'm sure many of you have read, and if you haven't, they're on sale afterwards. It's a phenomenal story of Trevor's life growing up in apartheid South Africa. It's emotional, it's hilarious, and it's insightful. Please give a big welcome to Trevor Noah.
Hello everybody. Good evening.
I'll do that. Is it like this everywhere you go?
This is fun. We have our own bottles. We can play a game. This is nice. This is nice. Good evening. How you guys doing? Good? Yes, hello? Thank you for coming out.
So this is probably one of the smallest gigs you've done, actually.
This is big. No, this is nice. This is cozy, but big.
It's a phenomenal book, Born a Crime, and I'm not just saying that because I'm interviewing you. It is genuinely wonderful. And there are so many things, as I'm sure the people in the audience that have read, and we'll do audience questions later on, will know that it's funny, in parts it's violent. What really strikes me is that really it feels like it's a tribute to your mother.
Well, that's really what the book became. You know, when I started writing the book, I wrote it as it was my book. That's what it was supposed to be. I set out to write a book about my stories of me growing up, you know, my heroic escapades. And then when I got to the end of the book and I coalesced all the stories, I realized that my mom was the hero of my story. And I was just basically her punk-ass sidekick. You know, and I'm glad it happened organically, because had I set out to write a book about my mother, I don't think I would have done it in the correct way. And I'm glad the pieces fell into place. But really, that's the truth. It's a story that really celebrates my mom. It turned into a love letter to my mom, as opposed to it being a story about how, as a child, I braved the odds.
It's a phenomenal relationship that you have with her. It's not just a traditional mother-son relationship. You are like her sidekick, your best mates. And one of the things that really strikes me in the book is when someone asks your mum why she wanted to have a child, she said she wanted to feel what unconditional love was.
Yeah.
Which is really, I mean, heartbreakingly honest, that she had you to feel love herself.
Well, that was the one thing that I shared with my mom that I talk about in the book consistently, is my mom is a brutally honest person. You know, and as a child, I often did not enjoy that honesty. Because of what I saw as parents on TV and in the rest of the world, it was, people who were particularly vague with the child and didn't really, share their emotions with their child. But my mom was honest, she said to me, she says, I didn't feel loved in the world. I didn't have love from my father. I didn't have love from my mother. I felt like I wanted something that would love me unconditionally. And that is why I wanted a child. I wanted my unconditional love. And then she goes on to say she then had me and then gave birth to the most selfish piece of shit that ever existed. It just eats and sleeps and shits and cries. And then my mom realized that, unconditional love was something she would have to give to me. And so I'm eternally grateful, but I found that quite funny. She never lets me live that down. She goes, I thought it was going to love me. And then and she talks about it like it's not me. She goes, I thought this thing was going, and this thing in it little shit, and it just screamed, and it's love me. And I'm like, what about me? And it goes, I don't care about you, and so yeah, that's really why she wanted to have me.
There's some great stories in there, really funny stories about your mum, but they're also, scrapes isn't quite the word, genuine danger. And I think specifically that bus journey that you're on where she literally has to throw you off a moving bus for fear that the bus driver is almost certainly going to kill you at that point. It's told with the sort of panache of a stand-up, but that must have been absolutely petrifying.
I think a lot of the time, what people take for granted, or maybe I think people do, is how aware you are of the danger you are in sometimes. When you grow up in a society where, violence is always around the next corner, you find a lot of the time you don't have time to think and dwell in the danger that you may be in. And the same thing happened to us growing up in South Africa during this time. It was a nation that was obviously, forged through violence, and violence was an undercurrent and still continues to be in our country. And, during that instance, I don't even think I thought of it as being excessive danger, if that makes sense. I grew up in a world where with my friends, sometimes if we're walking to go home, we'd have to walk through certain fields or certain, open spaces, and you knew that people got robbed or killed there. So you lived in this world where you were constantly aware of the danger. You were hyper aware of it. So on the day in question, when I was in a minibus, what we call a taxi in South Africa, and my mother basically threw me out of the car because these men were most likely, or they threatened to, and there's a good chance that they might have done, grievous harm to us. I didn't think to myself, this is the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I was just like, my mom threw me out of a car. That was like I was like, I'm sure there was another way we could have got out of this situation that ended with me being thrown out of the car. And once again, in that story, when I tell it, it's myself and my mom, and we're navigating through a really stressful situation. But when push came to shove, I always trusted her. I always knew that she was on my team. So in that situation, when my mom said run, I ran. I never ever thought about it. It's an instinct, and an instinct that is honed when you grow up in certain places. I always think to myself, it's the same way, a baby gazelle in the Serengeti, when its mom starts running, it's not going to be like, what's going on? What's happening? Mom runs, you run. And then when you get to where you're going, you ask the questions.
You ask her a lot of questions, actually, particularly about faith, it seems, and some of the great exchanges written almost like sitcom scenes between you and your mother and her faith. And one thing I couldn't figure out from the book was whether you believe in God or not.
I think, in terms of religion, I do believe in God.
Being mindful of where we are.
That's funny. In terms of religion, though, I found increasingly I'm a spiritual person, but I am constantly frustrated by the way religion is translated, or the way religion is interpreted to help people oppress other people. That is something that has always weighed on me when it comes to religion. So when my mom and I would go back and forth, like for instance, about church, one of my mom's most frustrating moments with me was the fact that she taught me to be logical, and she taught me to challenge her. She taught me to challenge everything in life. And so when it came to religion, I was afforded the same leeway. She said, you must challenge me. You must ask me these questions so that I can go back and read the Bible and give you the answers. Don't just take what I say. And so I did that. My mom told me to challenge her, and I obliged. I obliged at every turn. And what happened was essentially, I would question the way people use religion, including my mom, and we would play with that together. And that was a theme that went through our lives. It's the way. Is the way I would look at how you can translate a text and how you can use it differently in your life.
There are some wonderful examples of her belief that almost everything is a sign from God.
Yes.
Particularly when the car breaks down, the Volkswagen car
Yes.
you've got. When you're on the way to, I think you go to 3 different church masses every Sunday.
Yes.
And when the car breaks down, you see it as a sign that God's saying you don't have to go to church. She sees it as a challenge from God to prove her faith to get there on time.
Yeah, I could read it for you if you want. I mean, I find sometimes, I wrote the thing, so sometimes.
Oh, that's a different bit. That's for later.
I'm trying to think of what chapter that's in. That's going to be. Thank you. Wow, look at that. Oh, this is fun. This is fun. What page? This is exciting. I'm going to get to that part. Courtney asked for. Okay, so here we go. This was like the type of exchange my mom and I would have. I was at the time, if you want to picture me accurately, I was a very cute, plump child, very cheeky, unkempt hair, and my mom was a beautiful, very strong black woman. A lot skinnier than people think she is for some reason. A lot of people say to me they think of my mom as like a big woman, like a stout, but she wasn't. She's very tomboyish, very slender. So if you're picturing a person, that's the wrong person.
I picture this.
It's weird. A lot of people have said that. I don't know why I told you that now, but a lot of people have just said to me, when I see your picture of your mom, I thought she was completely different. She is not. So.
You know why I think that is?
Why?
And I pictured her like that until you described her later in the book. There's one bit where you
only made her more determined to forge ahead. It's the devil, she said about the stalled car. The devil doesn't want us to go to church. That's why we've got to catch minibuses. Whenever I found myself up against my mother's faith obstinacy, I would try as respectfully as possible to counter with an opposing point of view. Or, I said, the Lord knows that today we shouldn't go to church, which is why he made sure the car wouldn't start, so that we stay at home as a family and take a day of rest, because even the Lord rested. That's the devil talking, Trevor. No, because Jesus is in control. And if Jesus is in control and we pray to Jesus, he would let the car start, but he hasn't. Therefore, no, Trevor. Sometimes Jesus puts obstacles in your way to see if you overcome them. Like Job, this could be a test. Yes, Mom. But the test could be to see if we're willing to accept what has happened and stay at home and praise Jesus for his wisdom. No, Trevor, that's the devil talking. Now go change your clothes. But Mom, Trevor, and it carries on, but Sunkela is basically a very simple phrase in my mom's language, Xhosa, which is, it means do not undermine me. And many children who come from, immigrant families, or if you have families that speak another language besides English, you'll know when your parent switches into their home language, conversation is done. That's pretty much it. When my mom would vacate English, then I knew the conversation was over.
It's interesting you mention that, because language plays a big part of the book, and actually a big part of your identity within your family and within your friendship group, because you can speak various different languages from a young age.
Yes.
So you can speak the different tribal languages of South Africa as well as speaking English. And there are 2 things that fascinate me about. One is that you say when you remember things, you remember them in English. Effectively, even if people were talking a different language, your brain stores them as English. And I think it's your grandma, or is it your auntie, believes that if you pray in English, your prayers are more likely to be answered.
Yeah.
Because that's the language that white people speak.
Well,
That is really, to answer the questions, I guess, in sequence. I learned very early on how powerful language could be. I learned very early on how powerful language was as a tool that would help you navigate and give you access, into different worlds and more importantly, into people's hearts. I grew up in a country where we have, right now we have 11 official languages, but before they were official, they existed. We had 11 different languages in the country. And because of apartheid, people didn't often learn other people's languages. So even amongst the African tribes in the country, people didn't necessarily speak other languages. Zulu people were not necessarily versed in Xhosa, although they did understand it because it was from the same language tree. But then someone who spoke, let's say, Tswana wouldn't understand what somebody was saying in Tsonga or in Zulu and so on. Most people spoke Afrikaans, which is a derivative of Dutch, because the government, that was one of the languages of instruction, one of the languages of oppression, which a lot of people fought against. But I was always shocked at how simple it was to communicate with people if you just switched into their language. And so, again, learning from my mom, people get impressed when I say I speak 6 languages, and I go, but my mom speaks 9. So I'm an underachiever in my family. And my mom just did it because it speeds up the process, speeds up communicating. And so language was one of those tools that I used. And language was a tool that the apartheid government also used. And I noticed that when it came to my grandmother, where my own grand, really smart woman, fantastic mind, but sometimes even she would betray the fact that she had been influenced so heavily by, what she had been taught. And one of those things came to praying. My grandmother prayed in Xhosa, even though she's fluent in English, but she would pray in Xhosa. And when we would pray as a family, we'd have prayer meetings at the house, and she would ask me to pray on behalf of the family because I prayed in English. And, she always said I spoke like the English, that I had no accent, I had no African accent. She was like, you're speaking real English. And so she believed that God would hear my prayers before hers because the God that she had been taught to worship was an English God. God had been translated into Zulu, but he wasn't originally, And I mean, now as you grow older and you learn, you're like, oh, wait, God's not even English apparently, but that's besides the point. So my grandmother was like, you speak his language, tell him what we need, tell him about what's going on. And I would be like, but he speaks every language. And she's like, yes, but that one is a shortcut. And I remember once, like, as kids, because my grand is one of the funniest, wittiest, but she has like dry humor. Like, I don't even think, sometimes I don't know if she's telling a joke or not. And it's so funny, and I can't tell because she never betrays it with a laugh. And I said to my grand one day, I said, but Gogo, I said, why do you think, English and Zulu is different to plain? Why don't you pray in whatever language? She said, pray in English, English is better. And I said, but that's not true. And then she said, but then why do white people have it so good? And she says, clearly you can see their prayers are being answered. So we've got to get going. Pray there, pray. And so I prayed.
Language, as you said, is so important, and it's something that not just being able to speak languages, but being able to connect with different communities and understand people, that is something that is really troubling about modern politics. Obviously, in your incarnation now as the host of the globally successful Daily Show, must be something that troubles you about what will happen under Trump's America, is his attitudes towards different communities.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is I find that language is even, when you break it down, even in English, there are almost hidden languages. And that's where accents, I always go, accents are like the hidden languages of language. People go, can you speak English? But then I go, yes, but which English can you speak? And it's not just in America, it's not just in South Africa. In the UK, you see that as well. I was fascinated when I first came to the UK, and I saw how differently people would be treated just because of how they spoke. In my head, these were all characters from, a TV show, but British people would go, oh yeah, he sounds like he's got a Scouse accent, he's got this accent, he's got, oh yeah, no, you can hear, he's not, And I was like, what does that mean? was like, oh, well, you can hear it. Yeah, it's from Liverpool. And I was like, but what does that mean? I don't understand what that means. And I came to realize that in the UK, people would judge you based on your accent. So if you sound like a posh person, then all of a sudden you would, seen to be more intelligent, or you're seen to, which I never understood. I mean, I remember hearing Boris Johnson for the first time, and I was like, this person seems like a rambling fool. I don't understand. I don't understand what he's saying. But he mastered brilliantly, in my opinion, with that, that thing. Well, I would rather not perambulate on the outskirts of this issue with regards to Britain. And then people were like, oh, yes, it's very, oh, yeah. And I was like, no, that's bullshit. Like, what is that? But that's the power. That's the power of an accent. That's the power of a language, and unfortunately, that's the downside as well, because you see that in America right now. A lot of people that are anti-immigrant, when they say that, they're specifically referring to immigrants who do not have a grasp of the language. They are specifically referring, when you say anti-immigrant sentiment, they're not talking about, immigrants from Britain, because Americans go like, oh, no, that's like a safe immigrant. But oftentimes I find people are less likely to welcome you when you seem to be almost invading their language. And that is what an accent feels like. If somebody speaks like you feel like they are like you. But if somebody speaks your language with an accent, you feel like the person is intruding. They're taking what is yours and they're trying to break it. It's a strange thing that happens in your mind.
So what attitudes have you faced in America, not just with your comedy, but specifically the accent?
Oh, you must remember when I first took over The Daily Show, that was one of the biggest things I very quickly realized, is how many people hated me just because of my accent, And I understood that as a visceral thing. You don't even understand, why don't I like this person? Why don't I like his jokes? Why don't I like his opinions? Because they are coming at me in a different accent. And that's I'm glad I was aware of it, because if you don't know, sometimes you wouldn't know why you were connecting or not connecting with people. You wouldn't realize what tools you can use to try and subvert what is happening. But it's the same way children's television presenters know you speak a different way to connect with children.
Yeah.
When you're trying to connect with an audience that has an accent that is different to yours, you start to realize rhythmically that there are tools you can use that just help tune you into the ear of the listener without you changing who you are, what you're saying.
But isn't that fascinating? Because you would presume, perhaps wrongly, that the majority of viewers of The Daily Show would be kind of liberal left people who would identify as more open-minded, and yet even they had negative attitudes towards you because of your accent.
Yeah, but that is what people always do. People always surprise you, And I think all too often we are not as self-critical as we should be, even if you consider yourself a progressive or a liberal. A lot of the time, I've met liberals or progressive where I go, like, sometimes in their progressiveness, they will be racist, but in a patronizing way, And as a comedian, I love playing with that. I don't think I've figured out race. I think it's a constantly evolving thing. Even though it's a construct, we have to admit it's a construct that we are still living within right now. And I'm always fascinated by how those types of things happen. Like, I remember one person said to me, and it was honestly one message that stuck with me forever because of the irony. It was a person, and they tweeted me and they said, I hate I'm a longtime fan of The Daily Show. I hate what you've done. Bring Jon Stewart back. Go back to Djibouti.
It's time to be our guest. Disney's Beauty and the Beast will premiere at Sydney's Capitol Theatre next June. Give the most enchanting gift these holidays. New tickets have just been released. Book at Ticketmaster.
And I didn't know how to process that information. Because I was like, well, if you were really a fan of Jon Stewart, I know Jon Stewart personally. I'm like, I don't think he shares your views in terms of go back to anywhere-ness. That's so you are saying to me, go back to your country because I want my liberal show back.
Yeah, it was hard for John to write that, really.
But yeah, that's an interesting thing. There's many instances where I've seen it where we stumble into it sometimes, and it's
it's almost, I don't know what to call it. I never act like I've studied this stuff and, it's hyper liberalism or neoliberal, whatever it is. I just look at it on the face of it very simply and I go, one of my favorite examples was a random story for me during the Euro, the Euro football championships. And I'll never forget, it was the Dutch football team. They were training, and this was in, I think it was the Czech Republic, or it was one of those countries where they were hosting the tournament. And the players were training, and the stadium was empty, save for a few fans. And then people started throwing bananas onto the pitch, and it became a huge story. Oh, racist incident. My favorite, though, was in the telling of the story, was the Dutch captain who said, these fans were in the stands, and they started making monkey sounds and throwing bananas onto the pitch. And the Dutch captain, he lambasted them and he apologized to all the black players. He said, hey, I'm sorry for this, it's racist. And in that moment, I said, but how do you know that the bananas were aimed at the black guy? Because there are 22 people on the pitch, and this is the training session. It's just the Dutch team. There was no one else there. Someone threw the banana, and immediately the guy was like, man, I'm so sorry about that. And you go, why are you sorry? Because they throw the bananas, they're racist. And I was always like, if one guy said, well, how do you know that banana's for me? He's like, well, I know it's not for me. I mean, why would you throw a banana at me? And I found that funny. I was like, just the implied notion that you would think, you would immediately go, well, look, you are the banana. I'm offended for you. But that's your banana, my friend. And that's sometimes what happens is even on the liberal side, if you're not careful, it is almost a patronizing thing. That it's an overcorrection sometimes that happens where the racism spills the other way. And as a person of color, sometimes you're just going like, wait, what just happened here? I find it interesting.
But I suppose you'd rather have a situation where people are aware of race and are sensitive to it than people just be completely closed-minded and not act if they thought it was an injustice.
Look, I always go, growing up in South Africa, and that's what I talk about in the book, is apartheid truly, people ask me, oftentimes people will say, Trevor, why are you so focused on race? Why do you always talk about race? I say, because it's not going away, and it's such a powerful tool that you can find at the base of so many issues that we have. Race is something that was artificially created to oppress people. That's the truth of the matter. Race is something that was created to oppress people. You cannot deny that in talking about race. You cannot have a conversation about race and not accept the fact that it came to be for that specific reason. And apartheid was the best example of that. The whole idea of apartheid was the South African government at the time needed to find perfect racism. And so they sent a commission around the world to study racism. They went to Australia, they went to the Netherlands, they went to the United States, and they studied racism to see what the pitfalls of those systems were and to figure out how they could implement a more watertight solution. And I think they did. I honestly think apartheid was the most perfect racism we've seen in history, because what it did was it managed to divide not only black and white, which is what most people think of apartheid as. They go black and white. No, but apartheid was specific. Apartheid was precise. It worked on separating even people who were fighting on the same side. Apartheid was telling two black people that they were actually different, and so tribally they should be opposed. Apartheid was telling a mixed race child, a biracial child, that he was superior to his mother but inferior to his white father. Apartheid was about creating a world where, one of the things that was the most painful for me is realizing that, during apartheid, if you were a person who was my skin color, they called this colored, right? And colored, you didn't have the world, you weren't black, you weren't white. There was even a term in South Africa colloquially used, and that was in Afrikaans, they called it amper pas, which means you were almost the master. And as crazy as it seems, that was literally what it was. You were almost. You know, a lot of colored people were told, you could be white. It's just your connection to black is holding you back. You know, it's almost like it would be like, I mean, we'd let you in, but we don't know who'll come in with you. And so what happened is, year on year in the country, they would reclassify people as white or black. You know, the government would come out every year and they'd go like this, like, you know, there'd be lists that would come out and they'd say, you have now been reclassified. You could be a colored person. And if you became light enough and your hair became straight enough, voila, you were now a white person and your life would change immediately. You know, the same thing could happen inversely. If you were a white person who had the misfortune of over tanning and your hair was too curly, they could question this. And if that question was, you know, was answered incorrectly, basically, you would become colored. Imagine that, all of a sudden. And families were being ripped apart by this. Families would be ripped apart either by their own decision or, you know, or by the decision of the law. But that was the power of apartheid, is convincing people to blame the other for what is happening to them. And that is a powerful tool that we continue to see being used, you know, in our modern day society as well.
And it's something that affects you personally and very specifically, because having a black mother and having a white father, you were, as the title of the book suggests, born a crime under the law of South Africa at the time. But what fascinates me about, there are so many threads that run through the book, and one of them is definitely that you are growing up in incredible poverty, in intense violence around you, and yet, because you have slightly lighter skin, within that context, you're relatively privileged relative to